Well, hello everybody. I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas. And can you believe it? We're almost finished with 2023 and be going into 2024 in just the next couple of days. So anyway, my name is Brad Elder, and I want to welcome you to the Caught Up Soon channel. And I hope you enjoyed this series that I've been putting out on Israel. I'd like to get this information out to more people, and so if you would hit the like, subscribe icons and let others know about this channel, that would be greatly appreciated. And just tell them to get to the channel, they have to type in the complete name, Caught Up Soon, just one word, Caught Up Soon, to reach me. So thank you for watching. Well, in my last 4 videos actually now, we looked at why there is so much anti-Semitism throughout the world. It's a spiritual battle, and it's between Satan and God. That's the only explanation we have of why we see so much evil in this world. And we see this battle where it really started between God and Satan, and really this anti-Semitism way back in the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. What else can explain why that hatred, you see it throughout the world, as I said already. It's just amazing to see it, especially in the last really since October 7th, we've seen it just explode upon the scenes, anti-Semitism. Well, however, the Bible is very clear. Israel and the Jews will always be in their land, as promised to God, by God, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being Israel. So in Isaiah 44:21, God says this, I formed you, you are my servant. He's talking about Israel. You will never be forgotten by me. It's a promise. So in this, my second to the last video, I wanted to walk us through some important historical events that led to Israel becoming an independent nation. After 2,000 years, the Jews are back in their land God promised them. The world saw this promise literally fulfilled May 14th, 1948. God is faithful. God keeps his promises, my friends. And because of that, you can be assured that God will keep his promises to you and me. You can take that to the bank. Okay, let's talk about the events that led to Israel being back to the promised land. As you recall from my last video, the Romans, under the rulership of the Emperor Titus, he destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. That was also prophesied by Jesus to his disciples. You'll see that in Matthew chapter 24. Now, with the revolt that was over, after that revolt, huge numbers of Jews, they left Judea to make a home elsewhere. They dispersed throughout the world, really, but especially throughout that region. And for the next 2,000 years of wandering, the Jews ended up in Yemen, Morocco, Spain, Germany, Poland, and deep into Russia. Now, however, a small remnant of Jews remained in Israel, have always remained in Israel. There's always been a small remnant of Jews living in Israel, way back since the time that Joshua and the tribes entered the land of Israel. Growing anti-Semitism throughout Europe in the 19th century brings the Jewish plight to the attention of a man called Theodor Herzl. This is where we pick up the historical record. By studying the history of the Jewish people and their journey in exile among the nations over the 2,000 years, we are led along a path with a miraculous destination to a very important date. That date, May 14th, 1948. Israel was reborn as a nation after 2,000 years. You see, no one can deny that this was truly a unique event in human history. Never have a people lost their statehood, later become a nation, and after such a long period of time of occupations, wars, and persecution, back in their land. This was the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. In fact, in Isaiah chapter 66, verse 8, you'll read this. Who has heard or seen anything as strange as this? For in one day, suddenly a nation, Israel, shall be born, even before the birth pains come. In a moment, just as Israel anguish starts, the baby is born, the nation begins. Isn't that amazing? Well, continuing on, how exactly did this miracle happen? How did it start? As I mentioned in verse 3, it all started in Genesis chapter 12 with God choosing a man by the name of Abraham. In 2000 BC, the Jewish patriarch Abraham was promised the land of Israel by God. Abraham's descendants became the Jewish people. How so? Well, Abraham would have a son named Isaac. Isaac would have a son named Jacob, and Jacob would have 12 sons who represent the 12 tribes or the tribes of Israel. The kingdom of Israel emerged around 1000 BC and was ruled by great kings such as King David and Solomon. Over the next 1,000 years plus, various empires would rule over the land. These included the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Roman, and Byzantine empires. In the 7th century, the land was taken over by the Muslims. Later, the land would change hands a few times until the Ottoman Empire took control. In 1516 AD, the Ottoman Turks invaded and occupied what people call today Palestine, an occupation that lasted for 402 years, from 1516 to 1918, right at the end of World War I. During the rule of the Arabs in the Ottoman Empire, the Jewish nation had dispersed throughout the world. Many millions lived in European countries. So, in 1896, this man that I had mentioned earlier, Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist living in Austria-Hungary, he published the foundational text of political Zionism, and in German it was called Der Judensstaat, which is the Jew state or the state of the Jews, in which he asserted that the only solution to the Jewish question in Europe, including growing anti-Semitism, was the establishment of a state for the Jews. A year later, Herzl founded the Zionist organization, which at its first Congress called the establishment of a home for the Jewish people in Palestine secured under public law. Proposed measures to attain that goal included the promotion of Jewish settlement there and the organization of Jews in the diaspora. Herzl died in 1904, 44 years before the establishment of the State of Israel, the Jewish state that he proposed without having gained the political standing required to carry out his agenda. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. In June of 1922, the League of Nations ceased to exist. The League of Nations ceased to exist 20 April 1946 when they handed over all its assets to the United Nations when they came in power. But back in June of 1922, they approved what was called the Palestine Mandate, effective September of 1923, an explicit document on Britain's responsibilities and powers of administration in Palestine, including securing the establishment of the Jewish national home and safeguarding the civil and religious rights of all the inhabitants of Palestine. Well then, in July of 1937, the Peel Commission recommended for the first time a partition of land into a Jewish state and an Arab state alongside an international zone stretching from Jerusalem to Jaffa. That area would remain under the British Mandatory Authority. The Peel Commission was in response, listen to this is very interesting. The Peel Commission was in response to the Arab revolt against the British Mandatory government and repeated Arab violence against Jews. The commission also recommended an exchange of land and population between the two states. Now, Palestinian Arabs desiring political autonomy and resenting the continued Jewish immigration into Palestine, they disapproved of the mandate, and by 1936, their dissatisfaction had grown into open rebellion. The solution proposed by the Peel Commission was partition. The Jews were to gain statehood in 20% of the territory of Palestine, including most of the coastline and some of the country's most fertile agricultural land in the Jezreel Valley and the Galilee. The Peel Commission was rejected by the Arabs and was widely debated among the Jewish leadership. In 1938, the British declared the plan impossible to implement. So I wanted to show you what, I have a map here of the Peel Commission. I just want to show you if you want to get a picture. Now, remember guys, I'm getting all this information, historical facts and stuff, through historians and through encyclopedias. I mean, this stuff is all out there for your information. You can get the same information I'm giving you, but I'm hoping that this will help what I'm saying, so that as you do your homework, you'll say, I remember Brad saying about that. And, oh, I see. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. But look at this. This is this was the Peel Commission. And you see where the land is, okay? Well, you see that orange area, that area there, that was all going to give to the Arabs. And you see the area that's green? Well, that was going to be given to the Jews, okay? That's what the Peel Commission had said. Well, the Arabs said, no, we don't want that. And so they rejected that plan. Well, and by the way, before I continue on, can I just show you something here? I want to show you, let's see here. Where is it? Right here. Just to remember, just as a reminder, this is today. This is all that yellow is Arab countries. And that little piece of land, that little sliver, that's Israel. Just keep that in mind, would you? And finally, if you want a picture of how the shape of Israel in relationship to the United States, well, that's what it looks like. So as we're talking about here, of Israel, the history of Israel stuff, we're just talking about a small piece of land, and yet the world's focus is on that, and it always has been. And that's what I'm saying, guys. This is not something that we're going to see that any man is going to come up with for an answer. This is a spiritual battle that has started way back in Genesis. So I hope having those pictures in your mind kind of helps you out. Well, I'm going to continue here. The next thing I want to talk about is the White Paper. The White Paper of 1939. The White Paper of 1939 was a policy paper issued by the British government and was led by Neville Chamberlain. And if those who have studied World War II, you're going to remember that guy. He was the one that went in and said, oh, Hitler doesn't want to cause any problems. He wants peace. He doesn't want to go into war. Wrong-a-dong, as he called. He sure did. Anyway, Neville Chamberlain, in response to the 1936-1939 Arab revolt in Palestine. That's when this white paper came about. After its formal approval in the House of Commons, 23 May of 1939, it acted as the governing policy for mandatory Palestine from 1939 until the 1948 British departure. After World War II, the mandate was referred to the United Nations. That's when they came in power. Remember I said they took over from the League of Nations. The paper was the establishment of a Jewish national home in an independent Palestinian state within 10 years, rejecting the Peel Commission's idea of partitioning Palestine. It also limited Jewish immigration to 75,000 for 5 years and ruled that further immigration would be determined by Arab majority. Jews were restricted from buying Arab land in all but 5% of the mandate. The Arab Higher Committee initially argued that the independence of a future Palestinian government would prove to be illusionary, since the Jews could prevent its functioning by withdrawing or withholding participation. And real authority would still be in the hands of the British officials. That was their concern. That was the Arabs' concern about this white paper, or this partition too. And the limitations of the Jewish immigration were also held to be insufficient, since there was no guarantee immigration would not resume after 5 years. In place of the policy enunciated in the white paper, the Arab Higher Committee called for, quote, a complete and final prohibition, unquote, of Jewish immigration and a repudiation of the Jewish national home policy altogether. You see, they just said, we want it all or nothing, all or nothing. And that's how it still is today, guys, all or nothing. After the outbreak of war in September 1939, the head of the Jewish Agency for Palestine, David Ben-Gurion, declared, quote, we will fight the white paper as if there is no war, and fight the war as if there is no white paper. At the end of World War II, the British Labour Party conference voted to rescind the white paper and to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. But the party's foreign minister, Ernest Bevin, persisted with the policy, which remained in effect until the May 1948 British departure into Palestine. Well, then we come to November 29, 1947, the United Nations Partition Plan. Following World War II, escalating hostilities between Arabs and Jews over the fate of Palestine and between the Zionist militias and the British Army compelled Britain to relinquish its mandate over Palestine. Although members of this committee disagreed on the form that a political resolution should take, there was general agreement that the country would have to be divided to satisfy the needs and demands of both Jews and Palestinian Arabs. At the end of 1946, 1,269,000 Arabs and 608,000 Jews resided within the borders of Mandate Palestine. Jews had acquired by purchase 6 to 8% of the total land of Palestine, amounting to about 20% of the workable land. On November 29, 1947, the UN General Assembly voted to partition Palestine into two states, one Jewish and another Arab. Publicly, Zionist leadership accepted this UN partition plan, although they hoped somehow to expand the borders allotted to the Jewish state. The Palestinian Arabs and the surrounding Arab states, they rejected the UN plan and regarded the General Assembly vote as an international betrayal. Most Arabs regarded the proposed Jewish state as settler colony and argued that it was only because the Jews had permitted extensive Zionist settlement in Palestine against the wishes of the Arab majority that the question of Jewish statehood was on the international agenda at all. Fighting began between the Arabs and the Jewish residents of Palestine days after the adoption of this UN partition plan. The Arab military forces were poorly organized, trained, and armed. In contrast, Zionist military forces, although numerically smaller, were well organized, trained, and armed. And by the spring of 1948, the Zionist forces had secured control over most of the territory allotted to the Jewish state in the UN plan. On May 14th, 1948, the British evacuated Palestine and the Zionist leaders proclaimed the State of Israel. The United States was the first country to recognize Israel as an independent state on May 14th, 1948, when President Harry Truman issued a statement of recognition following Israel's proclamation of independence on the same date. And by the way, if you just go Google that and look up that history about President Truman, how that all came about. Really a miracle. God had him in office just at that time, at the right moment for the United States, for the president to say, yeah, we recognize Israel as an independent nation. Well, anyway, the U.S. was followed. After this, the U.S. recognized them in May 14th. The U.S. was followed, listen to this, they were followed by Iran, which had voted against the partition plan. They were followed by Guatemala, Iceland, Nicaragua, Romania, Uruguay, Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Poland. Then, one day, May 15th, 1948, one day after they declared their independence, claiming that they had sought to save Palestine from the Zionists, the 7 Arab League members coordinated an invasion of what was by then the former British Mandate, marking the start of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The 7 countries were Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Yemen. The 1948 war ended with the Israeli forces controlling approximately 78% of historical Palestine. The remaining 22% fell under the administration of Egypt and Jordan. During May and June of 1948, when the fighting was most intense, the outcome of the first Arab-Israeli war was in doubt. But after armed shipments from Czechoslovakia reached Israel, its armed forces established superiority and conquered territories beyond the UN partition plan borders of the Jewish state. I'm almost finished, guys. Hang in there with me. A lot of information I know I'm throwing at you, but this is really important. In 1949, the war between Israel and the Arab states ended with the signing of armistice agreements. The country, once known as Palestine, was now divided into three parts, each under separate political control. The state of Israel encompassed over 77% of the territory. Jordan occupied East Jerusalem and the hill country of central Palestine, which is the West Bank. Egypt took control of the coastal plain around the city of Gaza, or the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Arab state envisioned by the UN partition plan was never established. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, Israel defeated the Arab armies and captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the Golan Heights from Syria, and the West Bank from Jordan, including East Jerusalem and the ancient Temple Mount. On August 15, 2005, Israel's plan for a unilateral disengagement from the Gaza Strip and North Samaria, put forward by Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, was carried out. The purpose of the plan was to improve Israel's security and international status in the absence of peace negotiations with the Palestinians. In June 2007, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip from the Palestinian Authority. Many thousands of rockets and mortar shells, over 20,000 since 2014, have been fired from the Gaza Strip into southern Israel towns and villages, terrorizing and destabilizing the lives of hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens. So much for decreasing its vulnerability to terrorism, huh? And as you know, what happened October 7 was terrible. Before I conclude this video, I thought it would be important to point out a few facts regarding the terms Palestine and Palestinian. This is very important too, so please listen up before you turn this off. Palestine, the word Palestine. This word derives from Philistia, the name given by Greek writers to the land of the Philistines, who in the 12th century BC occupied a small pocket of land on the southern coast between modern Tel Aviv and Gaza. The name was revived by the Romans in the 2nd century AD by Hadrian, the Roman emperor. He sold all Jewish prisoners into slavery. He forbade the teaching of the Torah, renamed the province Syria Palestina, and changed Jerusalem's name to Aelia Capitolina. Synagogues were replaced with Roman temples. The name has been used to describe the region since the early Islamic era. After Roman times, the name had no official status until after World War I and the end of the rule by the Ottoman Empire, when it was adopted for one of the regions mandated to Great Britain. The word Palestinian. The idea that Palestinians form a distinct people is relatively recent. The Arabs living in Palestine had never had a separate state. Until the establishment of Israel, May 14, 1948, the term Palestinian was used by Jews and foreigners to describe the inhabitants of Palestine and only had begun to be used by the Arabs themselves at the turn of the 20th century. The Arabs of Palestine began widely using the term Palestinian starting in the pre-World War I period to indicate the nationalist concept of a Palestinian people. So why won't the surrounding Arab nations allow the Palestinians to immigrate to the countries? When Israel became a nation in 1948, many of the Arabs wanted to leave the country. They found employment in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and the Persian Gulf states, but only few were able to become citizens of those countries. Often they were the victims of discrimination as well as being closely supervised by respective governments intent on limiting their political activities. On average, Palestinians, for economic and political reasons, are not welcome in host countries. But the Arab neighbors are not ready. They don't want to take them. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi recently said that the current war in Gaza is, quote, an attempt to push the civilian inhabitants to migrate to Egypt, unquote. Jordan's King Abdullah II gave a similar message as he said, quote, no refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt. Really? Why not? The bottom line to the why not. this is the bottom line to why not, why they won't accept them. Some 70,000 Palestinians, almost half the Arab population of what was British-ruled Palestine, were disposed and displaced in the 1948 war around Israel's creation. Palestinians refer to the event as Nakba, which is Arabic for catastrophe. El-Sisi, the Egyptian president, said this, quote, "This is the cause of all causes, the cause of all Arabs. It is important that the Palestinian people remain steadfast and present on their land," unquote. The Arab countries pushed this agenda to keep alive their desire to have a Palestinian state. If the Palestinians desire to immigrate out of Israel to neighboring Arab countries, then there would be no reason to continue the intifada. Remember that the charter of the PLO and the terrorist groups, Hamas and Hezbollah, what is it? They want nothing less than the extermination of the Jews, period. They are using the Palestinians living in Israel as tools to accomplish this goal. They do not care at all what happens to the Palestinians. Just look at what Hamas has been doing with the innocent Palestinians living in Gaza. They're using them as human shields. Well, guys, that's a lot of information I threw at you, huh? A lot of history there. You can Google all this and get it yourself, but I just wanted to put it together and give it to you to show you. Just don't, you're hearing certain things in news and stuff that are not true. So be, as we say in the book of Acts, be a Berean. Study it. Find out what is true. And I hope that what I gave you there, that would be a starting point for you to do your homework on this. Well, as I close out this video, I want to share a verse from Joel 3:17. "Then you will know that I am the Lord your God who dwells in Zion, my holy mountain. Jerusalem will be holy, and foreigners will never overrun it again." Again, that's in the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 17. God will never allow any nation to overrun or exterminate the Jews. It just won't happen, guys. God loves the Jews. They are his chosen people, his inheritance, the apple of his eye. God is faithful, and we can rest and be assured God's promises to the Jews and to their land will never be broken. And that is good news. Why? Because that means God's promises to you and me will never be broken. You can count on that. As I always do at the end of this video, I ask this life-changing question. Do you know for sure that when you die, you will go to heaven? If you don't know, you can. We read in Acts chapter 4, verse 12, "There is no other name under heaven given to man by which we must be saved." What is that name, guys? That name is Jesus. Because he himself said, "I am the way, I am the truth, and the life. No man can come to the Father except through me." Salvation is a gift, a free gift that is given to Jesus. You don't have to work for it. You can't ever be good enough for it. But you must make a choice to reach out and take the free gift of salvation. And how do you do that? Simply, you just ask Jesus. Ask him to forgive your sins, to come in your life and take charge. And he will do that because he desires. That is what he wants. Again, that goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. That is the purpose of why Jesus came, to redeem us, to purchase us back, to save us from the grip of sin and death. That's his will. He doesn't want anyone to perish. He doesn't want anyone to go to hell. He wants everyone to have eternal life. Well, thanks for watching. My next video will be the conclusion of the series here on Israel. I sure appreciate you watching. I know I'm looking at the time here. This one is 28 minutes. It's a longer one, but there's a lot of information I threw out there at you. But it's really important you know that God has his hands on the nation of Israel. And what we see in the world with all this anger toward and this hatred and this evil focused on the Jews, focused on the land of Israel, is simply a spiritual battle, guys, a spiritual battle between God and Satan. But friends, God wins. So until then, next time, I'll see you here, I'll see you there, or I'll see you in the air. God bless.